Hi, boys and girls. We're ready to start lesson 3 in our social studies book, and we're going to begin this on page 162. You're going to notice that I skipped a couple pages, but don't worry about it because we will go back to them. So just like we always start a lesson, we're going to take a look at that timeline. We know when we were discussing Jamestown, it was founded in 1607. So when we get to the top of the timeline here, we see the Plymouth colony, we are looking at 1620, so a few years have passed. We also do a picture walk. So we can see here there's some large boats and then what looks like some smaller people, some smaller boats going ashore with some people in them. Over here, we can see the castles in the background. So this is when perhaps the people were leaving from England. And then when I turn the page, I can see some gentlemen looking very serious, all gathered around the document and signing that. So we will be discussing those things. All right, let's begin with the "you are there." Follow along. You are sitting below deck on a ship called the Mayflower. You have barely enough light to see. The air is so stale that you wish you didn't have to breathe. The ship is rising and falling with the waves, but you're getting used to that. Your mother brings your dinner, dry bread, cold dried meat, and an onion. You've been living like this for 2 months. America will have to be a wonderful place, you think, to make up for this awful trip. Okay, 2 months, that's a long period of time to be on a boat. Now, what I want to remind you is in the back of your social studies book, you have maps, so you can always go back and reference the maps in the back of your book. I don't have those, but what I do have is this map when we were looking at New Spain. And so just to point out to you, England would be way over here. And so they had to cross the Atlantic Ocean, and then these colonists are landing along the shoreline. We have the Virginia colonists in Jamestown were landing in Virginia, and now we're going to be looking at an area a little bit further north. The Pilgrim's Journey. John Smith left Jamestown and in 1614 explored north along the Atlantic coast. He made a map of the northern area he visited. He also named the region New England and wrote a book called A Description of New England. Now I'm going to pause there because I always think this is a little bit funny. We know that when the Spanish conquistadors arrived and claimed land, they named it New Spain, and now we have English people coming claiming land, and they are just as creative, and they name it New England. Now today this region is still called New England, and it's going to include 6 states: Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And again, you can go to the back of your book and look on a map if you want to know this area and where it is today. Seeking religious freedom. Many people in England read Smith's book. It made them think about building new communities in the region he described. Some people wanted to move there to make money. Others wanted to move there for religious reasons. Now, this is going to be important because if we were back in a classroom and I asked you, what do you do on Sunday? We're going to notice a lot of diversity. You can go to any church you want to go to. In fact, you could go to your friend's church if you wanted to. You could stay home and not go to church. You could watch a program on TV. You could read the Bible by yourself. And that's because we have religious freedom. So we are allowed to worship any way we like, but that's not what it was like in the 1600s. So years earlier, King Henry VIII had banned the Catholic Church in England and replaced it with the Church of England. Everyone in England had to belong to the Church of England, and those who chose not to were punished. And the punishment would be very severe. So imagine you are Catholic, and now all of a sudden the king changes the religion of England, and you have to follow it. You are no longer allowed to worship the way you always have. You can imagine some people are not going to like this. So Hoping to follow their own religious beliefs, one group of English people had moved to the Netherlands. They came to be known as pilgrims. A pilgrim is a person who makes a journey for religious reasons. The Pilgrims had religious freedom in the Netherlands, but they did not like the Dutch way of life. They wanted to build a society where everyone shared the same religious beliefs. In North America, they would get their chance. So this is sort of the main reason that the Pilgrims have decided to take this a long journey, 2 months across the ocean, and start a new life. They wanted to worship the way they wanted to worship. The Virginia Company agreed to pay the Pilgrims passage to North America. In return, the Pilgrims would repay the company with lumber and furs from their new land. On a cold day in September 1620, they left from England on a ship called the Mayflower. So if you look below, these are the people that have decided to leave for religious reasons, to find a spot along the coast in the Americas to start their new colony. Now imagine you're getting on a boat and you're going to a new land. You probably want to go where there's some other English people. So the plan was that they would go to that area known as Jamestown. The Mayflower Compact. The Mayflower was headed for Virginia, but storms blew the ship off course. Instead, the Mayflower landed at Cape Cod in what is now Massachusetts. If you went to your map, you know that Massachusetts is way north of Virginia. So think about our geography. What is the climate going to be like up there? And there's not going to be anybody that already has a settlement like in Jamestown. So this is going to be difficult. Now let's do a little predicting. Okay, you see that picture of these people looking very serious. If you went to a brand new land with a group of people, what do you think they're going to need? What might they be doing up in this picture? Well, we're going to find out. Self-government. The settlers arrived in a place with no government. To keep order, all the men aboard the Mayflower signed a compact or an agreement. So when we look up at this picture, that's what's going on. They recognize that they can't just go to land and start a life without rules. So they decided to make some rules. This document became known as the Mayflower Compact. The signers agreed that fair laws would be made for the good of the colony. They promised to obey these laws. Now I'm going to point out something that we've seen before, and we'll be seeing it again, that at this time in history, the people that are making the laws and signing and agreeing to the laws are men. So that's not going to be fair to everybody. However, this is just the seeds. This is the beginning, the first time we see this self-government. The Mayflower Compact gave those who signed it the right to govern themselves. At that time, when monarchs ruled, self-government was a very new idea. So remember, the monarchs are the kings and queens, and this is exactly why they left, because the kings and queens were forcing them to practice the king and queen's religion. So they are going to have this self-government. This is the first time we see this. The Mayflower Compact also included the idea of majority rule. If more than half of the people agreed to a law or a decision, everyone had to follow it. Does that sound like anything you know? Majority rule? It should. We do that now when we vote. The majority wins, so we make our rules that way. The settlers took several weeks to find a place for their colony. They chose a site on a harbor. Fresh water and good land for growing crops were nearby. John Smith had named the place Plymouth. William Bradford, one of Plymouth's early governors, wrote, "Being thus arrived in a good harbor and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God in heaven." Down here, we just see a main idea and details. And you can see my book's answer. Why was this so important? It gave the Pilgrims the right to govern themselves. Now, we're going to pause there, and we will be going into our packet and doing the activity that matches this part of the lesson.